The glossy expanse of Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport always hummed with stories, but none would echo quite like the morning the Dewhurst family boarded Flight 527 to New York. To most, they looked like any loving, blended family. A well-dressed father with tired but kind eyes, a regal mother whose quiet confidence turned heads, and two children. Caden, 13, a wiry boy with boundless energy and a pair of silver headphones clamped over his ears, and his little sister Zara, 9, whose curls bounced as she danced around the waiting area, giggling. But to Lyle Hartman, a first-class passenger with a schedule as tight as his jaw, they looked like an inconvenience. Lyle was the sort of man who demanded excellence, from his suits to his service, the kind who breezed through boarding with a platinum Amex and expected the world to keep up. He glanced over his phone, catching the family in his periphery. He grimaced as Caden let out a whoop of laughter, Zara chasing him around a line of leather seats. Unbelievable, Lyle muttered to himself, pulling his designer briefcase closer. First class, and they let children, unruly ones, run wild. His gaze lingered a moment too long. Nearby, a flight attendant, Emily, young but quick-witted, noticed Lyle's impatience. She shot him a practiced smile, one she reserved for the difficult ones. But Lyle wasn't the only one watching. Across the terminal, Marcellus Dewhurst, the father, kept one eye on his children and the other on his wife, Dr. Nina Dewhurst. She had just finished a conference on pediatric medicine and was fielding a flurry of congratulatory texts. Marcellus reached over, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. They'd learned after years of traveling to ignore the stares, the whispers, the subtle slights. But today, Marcellus sensed a different edge, something brewing. As boarding began, the Dewhursts gathered their things, making their way to the gate. Lyle shot them a look as he strode ahead, boarding first with the other priority passengers. Once inside the plane, he arranged his belongings, making sure there was ample space for his laptop, noise-canceling headphones, and freshly pressed newspaper. He was still fussing with his seatbelt when he heard the unmistakable sound of children's laughter approaching. Zara was singing softly, a silly made-up tune about airplanes and clouds, while Caden imitated the deep baritone of the captain making pre-flight announcements. "This is your captain speaking. Next stop, Candyland." Lyle's eye twitched. When the Dewhurst family arrived at their seats, 1A through 1D, right at the front, Lyle's patience cracked. He leaned over to Emily, flagging her with a raised finger before the family had even settled. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying over the hum of boarding. "I specifically paid for a first-class seat to avoid this sort of disruption. Isn't there an area for families with children? Preferably far from the working professionals?" Emily blinked. She was used to complaints, but there was a sharpness to Lyle's tone, a simmering condescension she recognized all too well. "Sir, all first-class passengers are welcome here," she replied, her smile unwavering. But Lyle wasn't finished. "I just hope the experience lives up to the price," he muttered, not quite quietly enough. Dr. Nina Dewhurst heard him. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing, her hand gently settling on Zara's shoulder. Marcellus simply offered a tight, knowing smile. Caden, oblivious, pulled out his tablet and started doodling, the sounds of seatbelts clicking and suitcases being shuffled filling the cabin. As the doors closed and the plane began to taxi, Lyle shot another look at the family, this time catching Marcellus's eye. There was something familiar in the father's gaze, a calm that came from experience, and a confidence that suggested Lyle might have underestimated more than just a pair of playful kids. The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming passengers and announcing a slight delay due to air traffic. The Dewhurst children didn't mind. They were too busy marveling at the view, asking questions about the clouds, the engines, the way the world looked so small from above. But for Lyle Hartman, this was just the beginning of what he considered an unacceptable inconvenience. He had no idea that before the flight was over, everything he thought he knew about privilege, class, and the family in row 1 would be upended, publicly and spectacularly. The plane had been airborne for nearly an hour, slicing through a velvet sky while city grids faded into anonymous patterns far below. In first class, service was in full swing, warm towels, clinking glasses, and murmured requests for sparkling water. For most passengers, it was just another routine flight, but the Dewhurst family's presence had not gone unnoticed. Lyle Hartman, still smarting from what he considered an affront to first-class standards, kept up a steady stream of complaints. He rang the call button twice in 20 minutes, first for a pillow, not obviously used, then for headphones, not those cheap plastic ones. Each time Emily obliged with tight-lipped patience, casting sympathetic glances at the Dewhurst family when she thought Lyle wasn't looking. Across the aisle, Marcellus watched his children lean over their seats, gazing out the window as the world shrank beneath them. He felt the eyes of other passengers flicker his way. There was the couple in 2A and 2B, whispering as Caden recounted a science fact he'd read in a book about flight mechanics, and the elderly woman in 1E, clutching her purse tighter whenever Zara burst into spontaneous giggles. But the true storm was still brewing. It began when the crew started serving lunch. The aroma of seared salmon and garlic mashed potatoes filled the cabin. Emily approached with trays, but Lyle intercepted her before she reached the Dewhursts. "Excuse me," he spoke louder than necessary. "I just hope there won't be any more disturbances during the meal. I expect a certain standard up here." His words hung in the air like a foul odor. Other passengers glanced over, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats, others openly watching for drama. Caden looked up, confusion wrinkling his brow. Zara shrank against her mother, her curls hiding her face. Marcellus met Lyle's gaze, his voice calm but firm. "We're just trying to enjoy our flight, like everyone else." Lyle smirked. "Some of us are paying for more than just a seat, you know." Decorum matters. A sharp silence fell. Even Emily hesitated, unsure whether to serve or intervene. It was Dr. Nina Dewhurst who finally broke it. She set her fork down, her voice measured but resonant. "You may have paid for a first-class ticket, sir, but class isn't something you can buy." A soft gasp rippled through the cabin. The couple in 2A exchanged glances. The elderly woman in 1E muttered under her breath, and even Emily paused, her eyes widening. Lyle opened his mouth to retort, but the captain's voice interrupted. "Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. We're about to experience some turbulence." As if on cue, the plane began to shake gently, then more violently. Drinks wobbled, silverware clattered. For a moment, all pretense fell away. The Dewhurst family held hands across the aisle. Caden squeezing his father's hand, Zara nestling against her mother. Emily made her rounds, checking seatbelts. When she reached Lyle, he snapped, "This is ridiculous. Turbulence like this? I hope the pilots are qualified." Emily smiled, just a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Don't worry, sir. Our crew is the best in the business. In fact, the owner of this airline is actually on board today." A ripple of curiosity swept through first class. Passengers began whispering. Who could it be? Someone in business class? A celebrity? Lyle's curiosity flickered, but was quickly replaced by annoyance as the plane continued to jostle. Caden, instead of being frightened, excitedly explained to Zara how turbulence worked, using napkins and salt packets as props. Other children might have cried, but the Dewhurst kids took it in stride, drawing the admiration of a few neighboring passengers. As the turbulence passed and calm returned, Emily came back with meals. She served the Dewhurst family first this time, placing their plates with a soft "enjoy." Marcellus thanked her warmly. The couple in 2A, emboldened by Dr. Nina's earlier words, leaned over. "Your children are wonderful," the woman said quietly. "You must be proud." Marcellus smiled, his gratitude genuine. "Thank you. We try to teach them to rise above." Lyle, witnessing this exchange, grew more agitated. He muttered to himself, glaring at Marcellus. "Some people just don't know their place," he whispered, loud enough for several nearby passengers to hear. That was the last straw for Emily. She turned to Lyle, her voice gentle but unwavering. "Sir, we ask all passengers to treat each other with respect, regardless of seat or background. If you need anything further, please let us know. Otherwise, I'd appreciate if we could maintain a pleasant environment." Lyle was left speechless, a rarity for him. The cabin, once on edge, felt noticeably lighter. As the flight wore on, the Dewhursts relaxed, chatting quietly, Caden showing Zara the constellations visible through the window as night fell. Around them, the atmosphere softened. The elderly woman in 1E even smiled at Zara, offering her a butterscotch candy. But Lyle's pride was wounded. He stood in silence, casting furtive glances at Marcellus and his family. He had no idea that the biggest surprise and the greatest lesson was yet to come. By the time the wheels touched down in New York, every passenger in first class would see the Dewhursts in a very different light. The landing gear whined as the aircraft dipped toward JFK, New York's lights glittering beneath like scattered jewels. In first class, passengers prepared to disembark, gathering their things, adjusting ties, running fingers through hair to erase hours of stale cabin air. Tension, however, still clung to the seats like static. As soon as the seatbelt sign blinked off, Lyle Hartman was up, blocking the aisle with the aggressive entitlement of someone who believes the world owes him passage. He glared pointedly at the Dewhurst family as they calmly collected their belongings, Zara clutching her mother's scarf, Caden slinging a battered backpack over his shoulder. Most of first class, having witnessed the drama, watched now with curiosity, whispers growing louder. The elderly woman in 1E lingered, eyes darting between Lyle and the Dewhursts. Emily, the flight attendant, stood at the front, her composure ironclad. She pressed the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of North Star Airlines, we'd like to thank you for choosing us. Please remain seated until the captain turns off the seatbelt sign. We hope you've enjoyed your flight." As the doors opened and the jet bridge docked, a tall, impeccably dressed man in a navy suit appeared at the cockpit door. His face was instantly recognizable to those who followed business news. Marcellus Dewhurst, founder and CEO of North Star Airlines, one of the youngest and most visionary black executives in the country. A collective hush swept through the cabin. Lyle's eyes widened. The couple in 2A gasped. Even Emily's smile took on a secret triumph. Marcellus stepped forward, his family behind him. He paused, facing the first-class cabin. "Before we go, I'd like to thank the crew for their professionalism and many of you for your kindness to my family. This was my children's first time in the sky since our company expanded. I wanted them to see what it means to fly with dignity and to face the world with courage, even when others might doubt their place." He turned to Emily. "Thank you, Emily, for standing up for what's right. That's the spirit of North Star." The elderly woman in 1E stood. "Your daughter reminds me of my own, 40 years ago. Don't let anyone tell her she doesn't belong." But Lyle, red-faced and flustered, tried to slip past the Dewhursts. Marcellus stepped aside, letting him through, but not before saying quietly, "First class isn't just about tickets or titles. It's about character. I hope next time you'll remember that." Lyle stopped in his tracks, the weight of the cabin's gaze upon him. For the first time, he had no comeback. He shuffled away, his arrogance dissolved by shame. As the Dewhurst family exited, something remarkable happened. The other passengers began to applaud, tentatively at first, then with growing conviction. It wasn't just for the CEO, but for his wife, his children, and for every person who'd ever been made to feel less than in a place they had every right to be. Caden turned, beaming at his father, and Zara squeezed her mother's hand. Nina whispered, "You showed them who you are, not with power, but with grace." On the jet bridge, Marcellus paused. He knelt to look his children in the eyes. "You belong everywhere your courage takes you. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." Outside, the city buzzed with its own chaotic rhythm, oblivious to the small revolution that had just unfolded 30,000 feet above. But inside that aircraft, hearts had shifted. Prejudices had been shattered. And for at least a few people, the definition of first class would never be the same. The camera would linger on Emily, standing at the door, eyes bright. She mouthed silently to the Dewhurst kids, "Fly high." And as the family disappeared into the crowd, the story closed, not just with justice served, but with a lesson etched into every witness. First class is earned, not bought. Not